The world looks to California to answer the hard questions, for redemption, to introduce the unfamiliar, to be resilient. Because California bounces back, holds us accountable, values who we are, remains vigilant, defies those in our way, and stands for community. Here on the West Coast, we're at the center of it all. Los Angeles Times, the state of what's next.
Hey, Malcolm, you know that Audible's got a lot more than audiobooks?
Of course, podcasts,
Originals,
bestsellers,
future bestsellers,
sleep stories.
sleep story. What are you talking about, sleep story? Malcolm. Oh, wow. Malcolm. Malcolm. Hey, no, Roxy. Hey, Roxy, get out of Malcolm's house.
The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories, all in one place. Audible.
Hi, I'm Donna Weirs, editor of the LA Times Book Club. Thank you all for tuning in to the 26th Annual Festival of Books. I'm so delighted to be in conversation this afternoon with best-selling author James Patterson, the king of the page-turner. He's created so many enduring fictional characters and series, including Alex Cross in the Women's Murder Club, and is the master of literary collaborations, notably teaming up with Bill Clinton in 2018 to write The President is Missing. His latest project is The Coldest Case, a new Audible drama featuring a cast of more than 30 actors, including Aaron Paul, Kristen Ritter, and Beau Bridges. In 2015, he received the LA Times Innovators Award for his tireless efforts to support young readers, teachers, libraries, and independent booksellers. He joins us today from Florida. Welcome, James Patterson.
Hey, I missed coming out. I can't wait to get back out to LA. I haven't been there in a while.
We missed the In Real Life Festival too, but I'm so glad that you could join us today virtually, and I'm really excited to be chatting with you.
Yeah.
I want to hear all about The Coldest Case, which is...
You've come to the right place.
Yeah, it's interesting that it brings back your Chicago detective, Billy Harney from the Black Book. And it's a departure for you because instead of writing it as a novel, as you always do, you wrote it strictly for Audible. So I thought you could just start out by telling us a little bit about The Coldest Case. What's the story about?
Well, a lot of it is just, I just love new challenges. I did book shots, which were, sort of novellas. I did about 80 of those. And so I love the idea of trying the podcast thing. And, as you mentioned with Aaron and Kristen Ritter and Natalie Emanuel, it's a great cast. And this is a prequel actually to the Black Book. You don't need to have read the Black Book, but in the Black Book, Billy Harney is an interesting detective for me. It takes place in Chicago, and one of the things he does, he goes to a cop bar, and they have an open mic there, and he does comedy, and the comedy is based on just stuff he's seen in Chicago, and he's very funny. He should be, and he's very funny in the Coldest Case as well. Maybe even funnier in the Black Book. And then recently, in the last month or so, I brought out Red Book, which is a sequel to the Black Book. So we've got the Black Book, and then we have the prequel, which was the Audible podcast. And in the podcast, and as I said, you don't need to have read any of the books, but this Black Book is missing, and we don't know exactly. All we know is that people want it back, and it has incriminating evidence against very rich people in Chicago, politicians, athletes, entertainers. So everybody wants it back, and everybody needs to understand what are the secrets that are in the Black Book. So that's the mystery. But I think what really makes the story cook in all of these, and especially in Coldest Case, is just the characters. Billy Harney, for me, a lot of people, Alice Cross is their favorite, and then some people like Women's Murder Club. I actually like Billy Harney the best, probably by a little bit, primarily because he's a good detective. He's an interesting guy. He's complicated. He's flawed, and he's funny. He's a very funny guy. So yeah, kind of like that.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you approached writing this as an Audible story, where you had to
Yeah.
focus not just on words, but on the sounds to build suspense in the story. That's some of the best parts, is the sounds in the backdrop. And I want to
Sure.
say,
Yeah.
I just want to, before you even go into it, I just want to say, I listened to the Coldest case, and then it set me back and made me want to read the Black Book. And now I just picked up the Red Book. So you're right. You don't need to read them in order. They're great. So if you could just chat a little bit about, how you approach this new format for you. It's very interesting.
One of the things for me, and when I first started writing mysteries, I was sort of a literary snob. I was in graduate school at Vanderbilt, and I never read mysteries. And similarly, when I started this podcast, I really hadn't listened to podcasts before, so I didn't know any rules. And I think that's really useful. And I hope as podcasts continue to get better and better and better, that we don't have companies coming in and going, okay, well, we figured it out now, and all of a sudden this becomes the pattern. So right now it's a wild, wild west. And it started with things like Serial and S-Town and My Favorite Murder, things like that. And right now kind of anything goes. And the cool thing about it is it's very kind of a democratic medium, because you don't need a lot of money to do them. And then with the Coldest case, it's really produced really well. As you mentioned, the sound effects are really neat. All of the stuff that they do in the studio. You used to have things a little like that back in the days of radio, but it wasn't as sophisticated as this is. And I'm amazed at the actors we get. I mean, the idea of getting, Aaron Paul to do this, and then Kristen Ritter and Natalie, that was a real tremendous thing. And Bo Bridges, Alexis Bledel also. So hopefully that will continue, where we can, get these really good actors into the to do the podcast for us.
Well, I know you were involved in not only the writing, but the production. And with having such a large cast, I know it posed some challenges, because you couldn't just bring everyone into the studio. Can you talk about some of the logistic challenges of pulling this off with
Aaron
30 actors?
Aaron Tracy was the person who was really, really involved in terms of a lot of the writing. And I was involved in terms of, it's a little like the movie process in the beginning. You want people who are going to be doing the podcast to understand the characters, to understand the Black Book, to understand, Detective Billy Harney and his twin sister, Detective Patty Harney, who are key characters. So part of it is getting everybody up to speed on that, and then trying to make sure that the voice is strong and at least consistent with the Black Book. And then in the beginning, I think the first crack at the first part of the story, we needed to go back and sort of keep messing around with it, and Aaron was great about that. And then in the editing, we can keep messing with the script, essentially, because we can take stuff out, put stuff in, and re-record some of it. So like that. But the casting, obviously, they would talk to me about the casting, and I loved Aaron. I loved the series that he was in, and
And he was filming it in his house and having to run and do all of that.
Yeah. Well, this is really, it was done in the middle of the virus, and so everybody was doing it from their little home studios. Fortunately, I think it was Natalie. I think the person she lives with, I think, had a studio in the basement, so that helped.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about your characters, because you always have great characters, and this family of cops that you've come up with in this series of stories, they're really at the heart of this. We meet, as we talked about, Billy Harney, his twin sister Patty, and his dad is the chief of detectives. So it's really a classic cop family here. What was your inspiration for creating them? Could you talk a little bit about that? Because they're just really. I don't know
the inspiration. I love the idea of writing a part for a cop where he could be comedic and it would be credible. So the idea of this guy going into this cop bar and you're allowed. I mean, anybody who goes in there is allowed to go up to the mic. You just have to be careful because they'll boo you out of the room. And Billy's good at it. He's funny. He has really good stories. And so it's not like anything else. I'm surprised, that it hasn't been picked up in Hollywood already because it's just different. And the idea of giving the right actor, the opportunity to be a serious detective in complicated cases, and also to let off steam and be funny in a cop bar, I think is very different. And he's not just like one of these wise guy cops, who just kind of, writes those kind of screenwriter funny lines. He does a little comic stick, and it's just different than anything else. I guess, in the beginning, Seinfeld started out that way, where Seinfeld would do some stuff out of his comedy act and show how it fit into the life of that character.
Well, so it's not only a crime story, but you also take readers into the realm of the big money video gaming competitions, and that was an interesting world. And what made you interested? And can you talk a little bit about exploring that world?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, that's very current, and it is, and people don't know as much about it as. And when we get into it, it is interesting for people. But I think part of the challenge of the podcast, it's 5 hours, and a 5-hour movie is a challenge. And so the trick is, okay, how do we keep this thing really going and keep it fascinating? And as we evolve this thing, or in terms of my involvement with it anyway, we'll keep working on that in terms of making it, more and more pacey. And there are other little, one of the issues with it is you have to keep mentioning the names of the characters so people know who the hell is talking. So that's a little bit of a challenge too. But I think, we part of the thing with the video games and whatever is just to have something to be able to that was relevant to the story, but also keep this thing moving and keep it interesting over quite a long time.
And I won't give it away, but it also becomes the video games and some of the become essential to solving the crime, which I will let people discover that for themselves.
That's sort of nice if we're going to spend all that time with it, that it has something to do with the story. But
it definitely has the payoff there. So you mentioned that you have a new novel, was just out in March, The Red Book, which follows the 2017 book, The Black Book, with these same characters with some new twists. Can you just talk a little bit about what's ahead for the Harney family?
Yeah, red is the new black, man. The Red Book. It continues with the Daddy is a Rolling Stone. The father is the head of chief of detectives, and he gets in some real trouble, which totally changes the family dynamic. I'm not going to give away too many things here. But we're continuing to sort of track down this Black Book and all the permutations in terms of what it means. And Chicago is just an interesting place to me to write stories. Obviously, you got all those, the NBC, Chicago Cops and Chicago Fire and all that. And it is a fascinating town and complicated, and a lot of good things happen out there and a lot of bad things. So I like writing about it, and I actually lived out there for about 1.5 years, so I'm semi-familiar with the town.
And so earlier this year, you also released another book, which is a kind of a special project, Walk in My Combat Boots. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah,
I think people will be very interested in that.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I've done any important books, but if I have, it's Walk in My Combat Boots, because I wrote it with the guy, Sergeant Matt Eversman, and Eversman was the actual sergeant portrayed in the movie Black Hawk Down. So he knows combat. And I watched Matt do some interviews. And a lot of times when you do interviews, like when I do them on television, there's a little bit of a screen between you and your interviewer. And I watched Matt do some interviews with soldiers, and there was no screen. They trusted him. He knew the right questions to ask. He knew the right follow-up questions. So what happened with this is Matt did most of them. I did some of the interviews. We did 130, 140 interviews with people who had been in combat. And for the most part, and pretty much everybody knows this because you've had relatives who have served, and um, you they won't talk about it. My father was in World War II. He never talked about it. Matt got people to talk about it. And then we took the interviews, which are maybe 30, 40 pages, and turned them into these 6, 7-page tight stories. And we have 45. Matt says basically it's 45 stories about 45 men and women. And Matt said it could be 45 books, except that each one is like 6 or 7 pages. And our mission was that if you've served, you would say that Sergeant Eversman and Patterson got it right, and they gave us a voice, and they told our stories. And if you hadn't served, you would say, for the first time in my life, I actually understand what it means to serve, and I understand what it means to be willing to sacrifice my life for other people. And when you read this thing, man, you are there. You understand what it means to be shot at for the first time. You understand what it means to shoot at another human being. You understand what it means to go to war. You understand what happens when these men and women come out of the service and where they've had a mission. They've had a mission, and part of that mission is to protect the soldiers to the left and the right of them, and that's a huge part. And all of a sudden, they're out in the world again, and they have to find another mission. They have to find another purpose. So I just, if you're not aware of the book, consider it. I think it's, I don't know if the LA Times ever reviewed it, but they should have. It's an important book, and I think if people read 30 pages at the Times, they'd go like, shit, man, this is an important thing. I think it's one of the best military books ever done. It's an unbelievable story. And I can say it because the stories aren't really mine. I did figure out how to make it very tense. And then the other exciting thing this year, I have another book with President Clinton coming out in June, The President's Daughter. And the first one was the best-selling book in 2018, best-selling novel. And the president and I both think that The President's Daughter is a better book. It's just very, very exciting. And in the book, the president's daughter gets kidnapped. And, if that happened in real life to a president, it would be 24/7 on everything. And we wouldn't be able to, it'd be for weeks and weeks and weeks until you found out what the heck happened. And that's what this book does to you, in that the detail is so accurate. It puts you there. And then it has my kind of pacey, very dramatic flair as well. So interesting book and coming out in June. So yeah, we got a lot of stuff coming, and it's going to be exciting.
That's a really good segue to what I wanted to ask you about next. Was you really are the master of collaborations. Writing for most people is such a solitary process, and I'm a newspaper editor, and getting writers to work together is often a big challenge.
But sometimes out in Hollywood, it isn't such a big thing. All these TV shows, you got 7, 8, 9 writers in a room.
But a book is different. A book is different, and that's often
Why is it
it's different.
Why is it different?
Well, it just traditionally is, and that's what
you got Peter Straub.
I'd like to ask you.
I know you're
how
going
do
to
you
say
make
that.
it work?
You've got Stephen King and Peter Straub writing books together. You've got couples writing books together. It isn't such a big mystery. Advertising, which I came out of, it's all teams. I'm not thinking. Music. Simon and Garfunkel, collaboration is a good thing. Even in the newspaper.
Oh no, I agree.
A lot of times you've got the journalists and you have the reporters, and the reporters go out there and they dig up these stories, and some of them can't write their way out of a paper bag, and you have somebody else writing them. You're always having all these, like collaborations. You'll see a front page story in the LA Times, and you'll have like 3 writers down there, right?
Oh, absolutely. For stories, I just think for a novel, I think you're underestimating the finesse you put to it, because writing a whole book.
Oh no, I'm all for it. I'm impressed with myself, man. God damn.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Well, I just wonder, do you give? Is there any specific advice when you bring in your different co-authors? Bill Clinton. You most recently, your new book is with David Ellis, the Justice in Illinois. What kind of advice do you give them when they embark on a project with you?
I don't give advice. I mean, I will write an outline for pretty much every book that we do, and the outlines are 40, 50 pages. I then will give it over to, and this is 90% of the things that I do. There was one year, a few years back, when I was doing the book, I had done, in addition to one book by myself, I had done 2,700 pages of outlines, and all of my outlines are 3 or 4 drafts. And I remember having a reporter in here. I'm in my office now, and over here there were all these drawers, and I kept pulling out the drawers, which it was all stuff that was going on that year. And the reporter said, "This is crazy. This is crazy." And then he said, "James, you are crazy." Anybody who's been to this office goes, "Okay, now I get it." It's mad stuff. It's crazy. But I do the outlines, and then I always ask the collaborator to contribute to the outline for a couple of reasons. One, I want their thoughts, I want their contributions, and secondly, I want them emotionally involved. I look at pages every 2 or 3 weeks with collaborators. Most publishers they say, send us the book. And then they'll go, well, I love Hollywood. It's so backwards out there, man. It's hilarious. They'll say, "Oh, go whatever you want, do this, whatever you want to do with the screenplay." And then it comes in, they go, "Oh, this is what we were thinking of." Instead of like telling the poor screenwriter, "Here's kind of what we're thinking of. You don't have to do this, but here's what we're thinking about." Rather they give them all the rope in the world and let them hang themselves. And then they go, "Oh, that's not what we wanted."
So you work off of outline, which is just your really great run of show. So you and your collaborators are both working off that outline and updating it rather than just writing and going. That's interesting.
No.
So
I don't.
you both.
No. Oh no, I don't buy that. Let's just go right. I mean, it worked for James Joyce. Well, look at the mess it created for Joyce. Finnegan's Wake. I mean, come on. That's just what happens when you work without an outline. I'm kidding. I'm kind of kidding.
Well, that's great. So let's step back a little bit. There must be, there's some people I know who may be just discovering your work or want to be more. If you have to suggest someone for, what do you consider the gateway James Patterson book? What book should they dive into first, or if they haven't? Do you have a book that you feel is?
Black Book, I think, is really, really fun book. Fun story. It's sophisticated. That's probably my favorite of the mysteries. There are a lot of the kids' books. Potty Mouth and Stupid, I think, it's great. It's about word bullying. I think it's a wonderful, my favorite kids' book. The middle school series is I think fun. Some of the nonfiction is interesting. The Lennon book, I think, is John Lennon book. I think is kind of fun. Alice Cross stories are, not all of them are great, but I think some are. Along Came a Spider and Kiss the Girls, I think, are good. Nice.
So there's that. You're not going to pick one. You're saying dive into the Black Book, huh? Your latest. Well, do you have a favorite character among that you bring? Which one was the most fun to write?
I like Billy Harney. I like Alex. Alex has been my buddy for a long time. The women's, they're all fun. I mean, somebody said you're lucky if you find something that you like to do in life, and then it's a miracle if somebody will pay you to do it. And that's kind of my gig. I mean, look, I grew up in a small town. My father, in Newburgh, New York, my father grew up in the Newburgh, New York poorhouse, the Pogie. His mother was a charwoman there, which meant she cleaned some of the bathrooms in the kitchen. And so I kind of come from that background, grew up playing basketball in the poor parts of town, and whatever. So I look at this as like kind of unbelievable. And I always look at the world through the lens of Newburgh, which is, wow, this is so cool. I'm talking at the LA Book Festival, or oh my God, this thing is a bestseller. Oh, I'm writing with Bill Clinton, or by the way, in terms of the best books, the Welcome in Combat Boots, I think is, as I said, I mean, people make their own choices, but I think it's important. I think it's a really, really, Clinton read it, and he had, when he was president, he visited more military bases than any president since FDR. And he said for 3 days he could think about nothing else. That book so blew him away. And Admiral McRaven had the same response. Actually, I'm doing a thing on Monday with McRaven. I'm going to sort of interview him about his new book, The Hero Code.
So I'm curious, what does a typical workday look like for you?
As I said, I don't really work for a living. I play for a living. I love it. Honestly, I'm up. I do it 7 days a week. I'm up around 5:45 to 6. I'm in the office. I'm very lucky. I love my wife. We go to bed every night holding hands. Honestly, um, we have one son. He's 23 now, and I like the family. Very family oriented. But I write early in the morning. Sue and I'll hang out for a while. I'll write some more. I'll stop usually sometime between 6 and 7, 7 days a week, pretty much. I usually don't write maybe 3 or 4 days a year, whatever it is.
How about has the pandemic changed your work schedule at all or your life? You
Well, it actually
probably
got
staying
me in
closer
the
to home?
office more. Sue would lock me in here for, so she couldn't. No, I wrote my autobiography. It's just all story after story after story. I'll probably get, I don't know, next year maybe, we'll see. And I was busier than ever, and it actually got me more focused, and I think got me pumped up even more than I was. And we finished off the book with President Clinton. I have another collaboration which we're not announcing yet, but it's great. In some ways, it's even more exciting than President Clinton. Don't tell anybody. It's with Pope Francis. No, I'm kidding about that. Yeah. But it is a very cool one.
Well, that sounds great. This year, in the middle of everything,
I'll be reading tomorrow. Patterson collaborating with Pope Francis. Yeah. No, it's not Pope Francis.
So this year you gave away $500,000 to help independent booksellers who were struggling during the pandemic. And I would like to just talk a little bit about, that was an extraordinary act. What inspired it? And if you could just talk a little bit about what impact you've seen from it.
Well, the need was there. It was just, obviously this is right in the beginning of the pandemic, and bookstores didn't know whether they were going to survive, and so and I wanted to also, just set a little bit of example for other writers and anybody who had money that our bookstores really need help, which is really essential, and they still do. We do a lot. I mean, I have over 400 scholarships for people who are going to be teachers. We did a $2.5 million with Scholastic for classroom libraries. There's whatever. I've made a lot of money and I give away a lot of money, but that's the way I was brought up. I don't take credit for it. It was a give back kind of culture. My family was, help people. And I don't take credit for it. I don't want pats on the back, but we do a lot. We do, I don't know, $10-20 million a year, a lot. More than the LA Times. And those people that own the LA Times are rich too. What are they doing? They're probably doing wonderful things. God love them. I hope.
Well, they are. And I have to tell you, our owners are supporting community journalism and independent journalism in Southern California. So we're really great. We're very grateful for that. Most newspapers are really struggling. So our owners, that's really important.
Yeah, good. God bless them.
I want to ask you, so from just going back to the booksellers.
This whole podcast thing is fascinating, though. I mean, I don't know how much people are into it or you're into it, Donna, but it's a new form. And as I said earlier, I just hope that we don't have companies coming in, not Audible, but just in general, and saying, okay, now we have it figured out. I mean, that was one of the things with network television. Okay, we got it figured out. Well, they had it figured out for a while, but things are changing real fast now, and they dug themselves into a hole, which in a way is great because it allowed all this experimentation and different ways to tell stories that's blossomed. And I hope now that the Netflixes and Amazons of the world don't go, oh, we figured that out, and then we keep exploring. And with the podcasts, the great thing about it is people can just do it online and create their own, and hopefully, good storytellers will continue to do these things because it's very exciting stuff. As I said, some of the ones that I have coming, I love this, The Guilty. And John Lithgow, actually, when he finished it, he wrote me a letter. He's such a gentleman. And he just said, thank you so much for creating the part. It's very, very cool story. I don't think it would have worked as a book. I mean, it would have worked, but I don't think that was a place for it. And hopefully, we'll sell it as a movie too. But because it's kind of a neat movie, we have a Ghislaine Maxwell podcast coming in the summer, Chasing Ghislaine. And it's, I had done Filthy Rich about Jeffrey Epstein, which then became that Netflix series that and once again, the numbers of people, like 100 million people saw that Netflix thing in the first 10 days, which is just extraordinary in terms of the number of people you can reach with things now. And I think there's great curiosity about Ghislaine in terms of what the heck is her story and what's she all about, and what does she know about Jeffrey and the complications and where his money came from. So that's sort of I'm doing with Vicky Ward from Vanity Fair. And she's so smart, and so that I think is going to be exciting. And then we're doing one with Zachary Quinto to another podcast, and then there's a YA one too. So it's an exciting area, and I love being challenged and doing things that I haven't done before, like kids books. The same thing was similar. Like I don't know if I can do this. I thought I could because I'm like a 10-year-old. So yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the next big project. You mentioned it, you talked about it quickly, The Guilty, that's your big Audible project coming in the fall. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because that one, I know when we talked earlier, you mentioned how you were excited about it and some of the details. Could you just give us a little more step back and give us a little bit of an overview of that one?
Yeah, I don't know if I'll do justice to it, but it centers around opening night for a massive Broadway play. This like the best playwright that America's known for the last 20 years, whatever. But he's very mysterious, and he writes these mysteries, and that are like every one of these is so unique, and he won't reveal any of the details. And it's opening night, and you find out that somebody, either in the audience or on stage, got murdered, and it goes back and forth between interviews. Right there that night, and then the actual play. So I that's enough to tell about it right now. But it's just very, very unusual, and I love getting Lithgow for starters, and then to have him say it was just such a wonderful. And Dwayne Swansky, who's out there, he's the co-writer on it, and Dwayne's great. I don't know if he's watching this, but hopefully hear about it.
So you said John Lithgow's in it. What's the rest of the cast for it? Do you?
Carrie Stoll, Peter Gallagher, and then a bunch of other people whose names I can't remember.
Okay. Well, we'll look for that. And you said that's coming in September?
It's in the fall sometime, maybe October. The next one is the Ghislaine, Chasing Ghislaine, or whatever. I think it's Chasing Ghislaine, which is, it's just, as I say, you just keep seeing this stuff about Epstein. It's like this mystery that won't go away. But with Ghislaine, she's a mystery on her own. I mean, she's just like, who the hell was this person? And Vicky, Ward from Vanity Fair, she knew her forever. And actually, I know a lot of people that knew Ghislaine as this socialite in New York, and Maxwell's daughter, and very bright, bouncy, smart. Smart as bright, same thing. Maybe she had a bright face too. I don't know. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you have such an interest in podcasts now for projects. What about your own media consumption? Are you a fan of podcasts? Do you listen to them on a daily basis?
I purposely didn't when I started doing these, because I just wanted to kind of invent it as much as I could myself and not have different things in my head in terms of how to do it, which, as I said, I mean, that's kind of how I started writing mysteries. When I wrote the first one, I didn't really read mysteries. I'd read Day of the Jackal, but almost no mysteries. And then I wrote this Thomas Berriman number, which interestingly was turned down by 31 publishers. It then won an Edgar as the best first mystery of the year. Edgar is the Mystery Writers of America Award, whatever. And I think part of the reason it won is it just wasn't like other things. Because I didn't know how to write mysteries, so I just made it all up, which is kind of cool. Which is kind of what we're doing with the podcast. We're just kind of making it up as we go along. I mean, I same thing. I always work from an outline, but I don't, I don't know the rules. There are no rules, which I think is very cool and exciting. And I think that's how art grows. Not to I don't want to confuse myself with an artist, but whatever it is. Yeah.
Well, so we have some questions from our readers, but
Yay!
before we go to it, I just would like to ask you. My final question to you is going to be, what didn't I ask you about? What else would you like to talk about with our LA readers? Anything else front of mind?
No,
that people
I
should
think
know
this
about
was-
you right now?
No, I mean, maybe let's see what the people have to say from whatever out near LA or wherever they're asking from.
Okay, well, we can go to our reader questions. Our first question comes from Margie. And Margie would like to know, when is your next Alice Cross book coming? When can we expect that?
We do Alex, late in the year, like November or so. So there'll be another Alex then, and I'm blanking on I can't remember the title. I'm awful with titles and people's names. What's my name again? James, middle name Brendan. Yeah, but yeah, in the fall, late fall. So yeah, it's a good one.
Fall,
and actually, the one that I'm just finishing is really
that's incredible.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from Times reader named Lena. And she notes that you have a background in so many different genres, YA, fantasy, mystery, etc. What do you recommend for people who want to establish their legacy in a genre like YA?
I don't know about legacies. I just, people are always going like, well, you're like, I don't, legacies it just isn't in my DNA to think about legacies. I think it's an exciting category. I did quite a ways back. Actually, one of my more successful series was Maximum Ride, about this group of kids who can fly. And whenever I go and speak at colleges, that's the one that students know. They go, oh, I grew up reading Maximum Ride. And then recently I did a new one called Hawk. And it turned out that Hawk, it was Maximum Ride's daughter. So that's fun. But so that's my YA. I'm actually doing a YA now, which goes back and forth between the present and medieval times, which that's kind of fun. But I don't know about legacy, so
Okay. I do have another question from
kept a lot of people up late at night. That's
so that's your goal.
Actually, what I want is, I haven't done it yet. I want to create a book that gets read so many times, on somebody's copy, that the covers start falling away and the papers start falling out and they blow away in the wind. It's read, that particular copy is read so many times. That'd be my legacy, that book.
Do you have a book in your house that you've read of others, another author that the cover's falling off, that you've read it so many times?
Well, I don't know if I have quite that, but I in the last 4 or 5 years, I have gone out, and this will be a disaster, Wheat Factor, whatever, Book Thief, different books for varying reasons, ranging from Day of the Jackal and The Exorcist to Ulysses and whatever the hell. I'm a big James Joyce fan, not so much Finnegan's Wake, but Frederick Exley, A Fan's Notes, Mr. and Mrs. Bridge, two of my favorites. That's two different books. Mrs. Bridge was the first, and then Mr. Bridge. I think it was in that order. Those are two of my favorites. Steps, Jerry Kaczynski. I liked, those sort of stimulated me in terms of short chapters and books that really moved along. They were, well-written stuff. But I went out and did a lot of those. They're sitting here, but I can't really see it. And weird ones, I have a Stephen King here, Different Seasons, even though he doesn't say nice things about me. I like that very much. Dice Man, which is a weird, book, but I kind of enjoyed it. Setting Free the Bears, it might have been John Irving's first, I'm not sure, but I like that a lot. Thomas McGuane, one of my favorites. Before I published my first book, I sent out a thing to 3 young authors who I like. Larry Warwody was one. I don't remember the third one. The other one was Thomas McGuane. And McGuane sent me back a postcard from Montana. Dear Jim, write a good book. your pal, Tom McGuane. And I still have the postcard.
Oh, that's great. Actually, that was our next question came from a reader named Linda. And you've covered it a little bit, but I'm going to just throw it out there in case you haven't. Yeah, she wanted to know who are your really all-time favorite authors and why?
Well, I love 100 Years of Solitude is probably my favorite book. The Book Thief is probably my favorite kind. I hate to say it a YA because it really isn't, but a book that's considered kind of a YA age. I think it's for everybody, but I love those two. As I mentioned, Mr. Bridge and Mrs. Bridge. Day of the Jackal, Exorcist, in terms of, that kind of a Girl Gone, I liked a lot. A lot of them, Red Dragon, and the sort of pop stuff. I was a literary snob. I was at Vanderbilt working for my PhD. Blah blah blah. Blah. I blew out of there. People go, "Oh, you left?" I left because of Vietnam, because that was the days of the lottery, and I was down there, and I remember going to this little bar with 4 or 5 other of my buddies who were all, in the lottery, because that was your birth dates synced up with some number, up to 365. And they were saying that if your number was over 100, you probably wouldn't get drafted. And mine wound up being 265. But the trick is that for it to work, you had to leave school at the end of the year. So I left school for that reason. I didn't drop out of Vanderbilt. I dropped out of Vietnam. So it was toward the end of the war, and it just seemed like a terrible idea. Yeah.
Well, thank you. What a great collection of books and authors, and clearly you.
Yeah, they're all over my wall, so I just can't see them from here.
So your office there just looks like your nerve center. You could plot anything from that center with all your books and
well, you can't see that over here. There are all these manuscripts. There's all shelves, and then over here more manuscripts. I would say right now there are about 30 of them that are in progress. It's insanity. I'm not going to bother to. Well, maybe I can do this. We'll see. I'm afraid to do it. If I do it, we'll lose everything. But there's the New Cross, and then a book I'm doing with Mike Lupica, which is really fun. One takes place in San Francisco. I don't know, a lot of stuff.
Well, so our last question, and that actually very naturally follows from what you were just saying, is Times reader named Jean, and she would like to know, how do you choose which authors and which partners you team up with on your books and your various projects? How do you get to be a James Patterson collaborator?
I don't. A lot of them are people I've known for a long time. I just got involved. It's an interesting thing. I have a series on PBS, Kids Stew, to kids. It's really a cool. It's won like 7 Emmys or something, whatever. And it's a kids thing, and it's really about getting kids to love to learn stuff. But it's engaging, and it's comedic, and it's really fast paced, and I got involved with a writer I knew from advertising days again, and he's like almost 70 now. Never written any novels and whatever. Now we've done like a couple. I bought actually the rights to The Shadow, and then we have one. He and I did a book. It's not The Shadow from the 30s. I managed to take it like 100 years later in some bizarre fashion. But that's a cool one, and I kind of loved collaborating with him. I don't remember the question now, but I think I ducked it. I didn't.
Oh, it was just how do people get to? How do you choose your?
Oh yeah, well that was one example. The Lupica. Mike is a kind of a Hall of Fame sports writer. Not kind of, he is. He's in the Hall of Fame of sports writers, and we talked one time. He was interested. I have a children's group at Little Brown, children's books called Jimmy, and our mission is when a kid finishes his Jimmy book, that they'll say, "Please give me another book," as opposed to millions of kids in this country who have never read one book that they love. And so Mike did some children's books, and we got together, and we had a long breakfast, a couple of hours, and he had an idea for, I think it was a book about baseball, and I went, yeah, we could do that. And then we started talking about horses, and his wife and his daughter both are in equestrian stuff, and then we wound up writing this. It wound up being an adult book, and that's going to come out in January. Called The Horsewoman, and it really turned out great. And I love working with him. He's very funny and engaging, and The Horsewoman, it's about a mother-daughter who wind up competing to go to the Paris Olympics. Equestrian is an interesting sport, and it's the only Olympic sport where men and women compete at the same level in the same event. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, so it goes like that. I don't know,
And
Why,
how did you team? How did you happen to team?
Donna, you want to do a book together?
Sure. We'll get you come and team up with our LA Times Book Club. That would be would be great.
Yeah, well, maybe you do one of my books. That would be,
that would be fun.
I have
what would be the best one? What would you suggest for our LA Times
I have
Book
one
Club?
for you. This is the one, and get a hold of it from Little Brown. I told you about combat boots. Okay. In that same spirit, Matt and I have one coming out in October. ER Nurses. It will blow your mind. It will blow your mind. It's spectacular. And,
how many books do you have coming out this year?
I don't know.
Every month? So you said you have ER Nurses coming out in October?
ER Nurses, get a hold of it and read like 6 or 7 of the stories. And if it doesn't blow your mind, call me up and say, it wasn't that good. It's stunning. It's just amazing. In terms of, and I mentioned in combat boots only, but how much stuff do you come across in your life where a book or a movie you go like, I didn't understand it, but now I understand it. ER Nurses is the same way in that for a lot of people who go, I had no idea.
Well, and especially during the pandemic.
Well, we try not to make it.
I think people are going to be very interested in that book. That sounds wonderful.
I try not to make it too much about COVID. We held off in the interviews. We didn't bring COVID up until the end because I wanted those stories. And once again, it's 40 or 50 nurses, and it's these 6 to 8 page on each one, and just captures their best stories. And the other thing it does, which I didn't expect this, but if I was going to write a book about the underbelly of this country, I wouldn't know where to start. Emergency rooms. They see it all. It's the one
place, yeah. It's like the police station, the emergency room.
Oh, much more insane.
Yeah.
At any rate, do me a favor and do yourself a favor. Take a peek. And obviously, you'll be the judge. You know about the book, and what makes sense or doesn't make sense for your group. But yeah.
That sounds wonderful. I promise you I will request a copy this week and get it when it's available. That sounds wonderful. And I look forward to, this year we weren't able to do the festival in real life, but we're hoping for April 2022.
I'm there if I get invited. I've been to 3 of them, and I love it. Yeah. I love the LA and I love the Washington. They're very good. Very good book fairs. Wonderful.
Well, this was just so much fun. And I just want to thank you for joining the conversation and, again, being part of the Festival of Books. Of course, I want to tell all of our readers to check out the new Audible book, The Coldest Case, because it really is good. It's, as I said, I got it and I sat and listened to it by a pool last weekend and didn't budge till I was done. It was good.
And to me, it's like movies for the ears. It's cool. And you can be running, you can be on your whatever the heck and hearing a story. It's kind of neat.
Well, the sound effects, the trains, all the actors, it really is, the production on it is really fun and just interesting. Well, so I want to thank you so much for joining us. And I want to thank all of our readers and just say, have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.